Today we're going to go over shift work. I know that's, for some of you may not be aware of it yet, and in the future certainly will be, depending on like what sort of service you end up doing, right? One of those shift works is like vampire hours, and that's really, you're asleep during the day, you're up at night. That's kind of self-explanatory now, right? You have like what we see a lot of times in the police department. You see like a third shift where your basically shift runs into some of the daylight, either in the front or the back end. And then you have like kind of an undulating shift work, which you oftentimes see in the fire department. So there's potentially some amalgamate of that as well. Like you might start off one way, but one thing for sure about shift work is typically shift work, no matter what your service is you're going to be doing it for a fair amount of time, right? On a deployment, you might be doing it for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 3 months, whatever it might be. You know, in the police department, here, like in Chesapeake, Virginia, for example, there has to be a minimum of commitment, I believe, for 2 years of that third shift. But, you know, and you have to do that, I think, you know, within, you know, once every 10 years of your time in service or something like that. So, and then the fire department typically, from what I understand in my experiences, is that undulating shift work of so many days on, so many days off, so many days on, so many days off. And that can be very erratic too, depending on what sort of emergency service your fire department or ladder or whatever it is serving. So it can be chaotic for sure. And that's the idea, is like, because the rule of thumb or the thought process going in is you can't change that, right? That's really a big aspect of those professions, is you can't go like, hey, chief or master chief or whoever, like, can we just go into normal work? It just doesn't work that way. So knowing that we can't change that, how is it that we are trying to navigate it? How do we optimize it, and these sort of things? And so I have a list of things here that we've put down that can help you reframe your approach to this, because we can't change it, and creating consistency within these shifts is the best way through it, right? And you certainly can optimize it, because these are examples of officers, chiefs, service members, whatever you want to call it, that have done this, that do this on a regular basis. And this isn't just my ideas. This is people that we know. This is my experience. This is people that we hear about and we audit and talk to about. Like, we look at someone and we talk about their life and family life and go, man, you're really put together. Like, how are you managing this crazy shift work in your job? And so these are a lot of things that we've heard and applied over the years for people we've worked with. So, and then these are in no real particular order, and there's some overlap here, and I'm just going to kind of highlight some of these. Okay, the first one that I have on here is meal prep is a key to success. And within that same thing is food quality is always paramount, especially with meal prep, because what we're saying is a lot of times in these shift work, there is some natural biological impairment for being up late at night, throughout the night, all those sort of things. And in these lines of professions, in these lines of work, there is an expectation that you are going to be alert, aware, making good decisions, all these sort of things. So meal prepping gives you an opportunity to not go and buy stuff that probably isn't your best option for cognitive, right? For recovery, all these sort of things. These, you know, we don't want to make food that makes us lethargic. We don't want to eat food. We want to stay away from these processed foods and things like that. So if a person is meal prepping, they're less likely to go to the convenience store and the fast food place to satiate their hunger, right? And in doing so, right, if we're eating higher quality food with our own meal prep, we know that at very least we're not aiding into creating more cognitive sort of dysfunction, right? Behavior dysfunction, physical dysfunction, lethargy. We don't want that. So meal prep is a huge component to that. And meal prep on shift work could be its almost own video, but just that's a big thing, is meal prep. You should be taking your food with you to your destination. Now, on deployment, that's not so much an option, but it is, again, so some of these things are universal and some of these not so much, okay? The next one we have on here is support. Support from your family, support from whoever is living in your domicile. Like if you live by yourself, maybe this doesn't apply to you, but in the future, if you have a family and kids and things like that, or fiance, significant other, whatever it may be, this is something to really take into account, because if your family members don't understand the importance of you getting your sleep and meal prep and things like that, that's an impossible task then. Now, part as a service member, our job is to communicate to our family in a good way to say, hey, sweetheart, honey, my loved one, I need to be doing these things because of my job and it's important. So we as service members also have to make sure in our 24-hour period, it's our responsibility. It really is a good responsibility for us to carve out time to be mom, dad, husband, boyfriend, whatever it may be. So that communication to say, hey, everyone in the family, everyone in the house knows that dad, mom lays down for his sleep at this time. Don't disrupt them. Try to keep the house quiet, cool, all those sort of things. So if we've communicated to our family the importance of it and they're all on board, that's a really good thing. We feel that support, right? That's a really very healthy house when that support is there and it's reciprocated both ways. Because like maybe after your shift, it's daytime, it's 2:00 in the afternoon or 7 a.m. or whatever it is. And it's like, that's your opportunity to always take your kids to school. Always do this with your wife. Always do these things. Be there. Like my father worked really weird hours. He drove semi for years. And my mom worked at the university as a chef for years. And so my dad was home every day at 1:00. My mom didn't get home until 4 or 5 p.m. And so my dad took on the responsibility of being the person who went and got groceries and starting to do the meal prep and things like that. And so it became a very healthy, happy household, and we had to contribute to it because my dad went to bed every single night at 6 p.m. Right? So dinner had to be on the table, all those sort of things, and we had to help out my mom because if he wasn't there, my sister and I had to help out, make sure there was food for my dad, for us as well. So there's a family dynamic that's super important, okay? The next thing is sleep hygiene. So like could be this entirely own video, but I want to highlight some of the high important things when it comes to sleeping. Like what things should we have in place for us to optimize our sleep? And the first thing is, I'm kind of reverse order here, is quality is always over quantity, right? So like we get it in those times where we're working really hard and like maybe you can only get 6-hour window instead of a 9-hour window. So we got to make sure that these things are in place so we get the best out of those 6 hours rather than a bunch of disturbing, every 2 hours we're disturbed by the dog and the wife and the kid and things like that. So quality, right, even if it's lesser time, is incredibly important, right? And so that becomes when you get in a regular schedule and routine and maybe your shift changes for a minute because there's an emergency, well, we still know that we can fall in this window. I may not get my 8 or 9 or 7 hours of sleep, but maybe I can get a really high quality set of 5, whatever that might be. And the family support is there for you to pick you up with better food, meal prep, and things like that. And that's where we always see the most successful, is when the family dynamic is involved around the service member's sleep hygiene, right? And so we definitely want blackout curtains. If blackout curtains still aren't providing a dark enough time because you're sleeping during the day, get comfortable sleeping with an eye mask, an eye pillow. They're comfortable, they're really very easy to find, right? And they're comfortable. So that was definitely an option because you want a dark room. Second thing is you want a cool room, maybe not necessarily a cold room, but you want a room in which you're not sweating, right? The temperature can vary from region to region. If you grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, 65 to 68 degrees might be freaking cold. But if you grew up in Alberta, Canada, right, 65 degrees might just be perfect. But again, so that's where the understanding of like, where's my region? Captain and I keep our room in the wintertime around 66 degrees. In the summertime, we keep it around 68 to 69 degrees, just because it's more of a humidity issue here in the summer than it is a temperature thing. So we flux depending on the seasons. And if we can keep our windows open, we keep our windows open all the time for that fresh air. We want the room quiet as possible, right? And there's a couple ways to go about doing it. If it's not quiet all the time, because again, maybe your family you got to be moving around, right? So maybe we can consider wearing earplugs. Definitely some soft earplugs. Wear them on deployment. I wear them all the time. On flights, wear them all the time. They're not uncomfortable, and they definitely provide enough quietness typically in some of those busier households to allow for what we still consider a quiet place. And along with that too is maybe you would consider using something that had some white noise or pink noise or whatever sort of ambient noise. A lot of people like to have fans and things like that. Definitely not having a TV and radio on. Not a good idea, and there's no argument, no discussion. If you were a TV on person, then you should never ever expect to have good quality sleep, and this discussion has come to an end. So white noise out of a machine, out of a radio is fine. Pink noise, like we have an iPad, a small iPad in our bathroom that has a little Bose speaker in our bedroom, and we usually run white noise in there if we don't have a fan on. And again, it's also, we have 2 Great Danes in our bedroom. And that certainly helps when they're moving around or when we're moving around. That white noise keeps everyone in the house, in our bedroom, like, hey, there's this constant, comfortable noise in the room, and that is normal. That's calming and those sort of things, okay? One thing you definitely want to have is natural bedding and sleep in natural bedding. You don't want to be sleeping in polyester. You don't want to be sleeping in polyester. You don't want to be sleeping in plastic, right? It's not breathable. There's just all sorts of reasons. Like, I always say we should treat ourselves like we would treat an infant. Keep it cool, keep it quiet, keep it dry, and keep yourself in normal, natural fabric. So I always sleep in cotton. Always, 100% of the time, sleep in cotton. Our sheets are cotton, 100% all the time. Our blankets are cotton. We do not at all use any polyester or synthetic fabrics when we sleep whatsoever. Not an option, okay? This one is a very simple one, but it's typically the one that's broken the most often is electronics in, around, or near the bedroom. 0 electronics near your bed. Now, emergency services, a lot of times you have to have a phone near you, next to you, whatever it might be. You should keep it further than an arm's reach from you. The reason is, from a psychological standpoint, you know that if you can't reach it, you're less likely to reach for it. So that is a really, really, really important thing. My phone does not even go upstairs. My phone, I turn my phone on silent, I leave it downstairs in the kitchen, and I turn the router off in our house every single night around 7 p.m. or so, give or take, depending on what our wind down time is. But electronics is not an negotiation. It's like having the TV on and things like that. And I wonder why I'm not sleeping. My phone's next to me, always lighting up and vibrating and distracting me because I'm always on call. I wonder why I'm not sleeping, because that subconscious little mouse in your head won't stop running on that wheel called your cell phone, okay? And that's just a kind of big overview of sleep hygiene, and those are big things to have, right? And we can take the last piece of that is food. What am I eating before I go to bed? If you're gonna eat or consume anything before your bed, it should be something of low GI distress. Like we use a casein protein or a whey protein or something like that you're not going to create a lot of stomach acid. You don't want to eat something before you go to bed that's going to cause your body to have to work to digest, like meats. You don't want to eat any meat before you go to bed. Beef jerkies, anything, right? And typically you don't want to eat a lot of fruit right before you go to bed, because typically that could really potentially, depending on the fruit, could spike your blood sugar. It's going to change your insulin. A lot of people will sweat and things like that when they're in bed, and a lot of times that's reflective of the food we ate prior to going to bed, even hours. We typically eat every night at 5 p.m. and we are in bed every night by 8. So that 3-hour window, we are totally fasted unless I'm taking Recovery Pro by Thorne. That is the only thing, that and collagen is the only thing I will take about an hour before bedtime, give or take. That's kind of the goal, an hour to 40 minutes before bed, because it's not going to create any GI distress. I'm not going to be sweating, breaking down whey protein. It's readily available nutrients that helps me go into bed with a bit of nutrients that helps me recover from my vigorous days of training or work or whatever it may be, okay? The next thing too is if you're on a swing, if you're on a shift work, you want to create, because I'm going to assume you should be, and if you're not, shame on you, you should be training on a regular basis, weight training, running, swimming, some physical exertion. You should be exerting yourself at least 5 to 6 days a week, period, if you're in the tactical space. You want to have that also be a regular time. So it's like a lot of people will get up, right? They get up in the morning or night or whatever it is. They eat a meal, which would be their first meal or breakfast. They go to the gym or the pool or the track. They do their workouts, and then they go right into work after maybe a meal, and then they go into work. So that good vigorous activity prior to your shift is typically the best thing, because what ends up happening, a lot of people that try to train on the back end of that shift, unless you are like, that's your only option. Most people's meals aren't in order. They've been seated an awful lot. That stress of the job, you're like, fuck, I just want to go home and unplug, or God, I don't want to go to the gym and be around more people. Because like, sometimes people get off the shift and their only shift time afterwards is the busiest time at the gym, right? And that's also, a lot of people don't want to be around that busyness, that hustle. They want to be unwinding and getting ready for bed, right? And so what we suggest is do your training, your vigorous training, before you go on to shift. That is typically the one that is the most successful, the one where people get the best training and they stay on a good routine. And then along with that, we said, make sure we have meal preps. The same thing as like when you have a regular training schedule before your regular shifts, you also now have places to put very regular meals. You typically will eat before you train. Maybe you're going to eat after you train. Now you're going to eat during your shift. You're going to have a snack or something before you go back home and go to bed. Because setting your gym time or pool time or run time in place very much creates a better time to eat on the front end and the back end of that and during your shift. So if you are in a shift job, right, and you're spending a lot of time seated, like on a stakeout, a squad car, in a Humvee, a helicopter, whatever it may be, right? When you can, on a regular time, at least once an hour, if at all possible, you should get up and move around and walk, right? If you can get up and walk for 10 minutes, at least every hour, if you're seated for hour after hour in a squad car, especially with the vest on and all your gear, that right there is a really, really great thing to, again, not just feel more comfortable, but maintaining your cognitive awareness, maintaining your heightened sense of awareness and ability. That movement, that locomotion also, especially because a lot of times as we got to sit, we got to eat and wait. And having those moments of locomotion every hour where you have to be seating and you're doing a stakeout, potentially, that food we eat, even if it's a high quality food from our meal prep, that really helps and aids our digestion. Because the whole goal is after our shift work, we want to be able to go to sleep. And if we are very sedentary in our movement throughout all of our shift, even after high quality food, think about it. Those of you who have had like a good meal, good breakfast, you've eaten a fair amount, and you jump on a plane and have to sit for 4 hours, you get to your destination. Oh man, for me, it's like the first thing I'm trying to think is I got to get moving so I can get to my bowel movement. And that is a big thing too. Being seated a long time really, really slows down your bowels. And can be extremely uncomfortable. And that's a lot of times that will really inhibit our sleep, okay? The next one I have on here is on off days. Off days are your friend, right? We want on our off days, especially in these high stress jobs, we don't want to slough off on that, right? I kind of tell people on your off days, treat yourself like you're sick, right? What I mean is a lot of people like, I'm sick. Well, now I got to take my vitamins. I got to drink more water. Your off days should be the days in which we don't have any issues, meal prepping, eating better food, getting good sleep. Like that is the biggest thing with our off days. A lot of people just get really lazy on their off days. And that's the day to meal prep. That's the day to take care of ourselves. Make sure we're not missing anything. And that, when you get into that routine, what you end up doing is those off days become such a productive day of getting on pace. It bleeds into your whole week of training because those off days will enhance your days of training by being as productive as you can be, okay? The last thing here is it's super important, and some of you may not feel the need for it or understand it at first. One is you need to have an emotional support system in place. These jobs are stressful. They wear, and these shift work times, they're biologically sort of not congruent with optimal. And so now you have this high stress job that has you waking and sleeping at odd hours that may put you at odds with optimal time with family and life. So there's a lot of depression. There's a lot of seasonal sort of issues with that. And so what I mean by your support system is it could be a friend. Like that's why you're going to the gym regularly, because you get to see regular people and you get to engage with something that's not the high stress of that. We can unplug from our job a little bit, right? Another really fantastic place to find that support is churches, right? Or meditation, or things that give you a real good spiritual connection so you can unplug from the very truthfully serious and sincere job that you have, right? We don't want to ever forget it, but we need a place to rest, not just our body, but we need a place to rest our mind. And friends do that. A lot of times churches and spiritual outlets will do that. And the last thing too about that is a creative outlet. Like if you love to play an instrument, do that. You love to be creative in any way, build Legos, read books, go on a hike, gardening. Like there has to be a place where you have a place to be creative that distracts you again from the seriousness, the sincerity of the job that you honestly like to do and want to do, right? There's a place, it's okay. It's encouraged and it's okay to do those things so we can put them down and we can continue on to serve even when we have this shift work, okay? So here's some outlines that we thought were important. I think they're life-saving things. They oftentimes, we look at this list and go, oh my God, this is too much. So I'm gonna implore you for this is that shift work can last a while, like I said. This doesn't all have to be done overnight, right? Implementing these things over that shift work, because then you become the mentor. When you are able to tackle shift work in a very efficient way, you become the example in your department or your unit that go, this can be done, especially when it comes to family life and the spiritual sort of reconnection with friends, your family, and God. So give this a chance to work through this, because we in the tactical space are really hard on ourselves. It's hard for us to find compassion to do these things, but this is super important if you love your job, because it will keep you fulfilled in that job. And because one of the first things that falls away is our job quality when we aren't taking care of ourselves. So take this for what it is, take stock in this, start chipping away at this list, and you will see that shift work is one of those things that you can get through very successfully, very healthy, and you can be someone that people depend on in those times that a lot of people they're not comfortable on shift work, they're not comfortable on vampire hours, but you can be highly efficient, and this is a list that will help you get there.